The Denver Nuggets are cooked. There really isn't a better way to put it. The Nuggets are heading straight into another financial crisis. And unless something changes, they could be stuck in the exact same cycle that chipped away at their championship roster. This season marks the beginning of Christian Braun's new contract, where he'll be making $125 million. And whether you think he's worth that, it's up for debate. I personally do not. But the undeniable truth is that this deal puts the Nuggets dangerously close to the second apron. After also signing Marvin Bagley and Alpha Diallo, Denver is only now about $4 million below the second apron. And keep in mind, they still haven't extended Peyton Watson or Spencer Jones. The second apron, it's not just a luxury tax anymore. Once you're over it, it becomes incredibly difficult to make moves. You can't aggregate salaries, your draft picks become frozen, and you lose access to certain exceptions in free agency. Generally speaking, it makes constructing a roster much harder. In other words, when you're over that line, you're basically committing to the roster you already have. And considering what happened last year in the playoffs to the Denver Nuggets, we do not want that. And that's exactly why Denver should be worried. But how we get here? In 2021, Michael Porter Jr. signed a 5-year, $179 million extension. At the time, made sense. MPJ knocked down them threes. Then, Jokic signed in 2022 his $276 million Supermax. At the time, it was the biggest contract in the NBA and didn't look like a problem. Because in 2023, despite being well over the second apron, they got that championship. Jokic, incredible. Murray looked like an all-star. Gordon, best role player in the world. However, you can't stay over the second apron for 2 years. It never works. So, the Denver Nuggets had to make some sacrifices. As soon as the massive contracts kicked in, they couldn't pay Bruce Brown, so he was gone. Jeff Green, gone. And in 2024, KCP was gone as well. The Nuggets tried to replace them through young players like Christian Braun, Peyton Watson, Julian Strother, and Deron Holmes. However, it did not work. In theory, this is what you should be doing. This is how the OKC won a championship. Young players that are ready to play now. However, none of these players were on that level. Now, Christian Braun last offseason was eligible for a contract extension, and then the Denver Nuggets had no bench. So what did they do? They traded Michael Porter Jr. for Cam Johnson. They got about $10 million more to spend on the bench, in which they signed Tim Hardaway Jr., Bruce Brown, and Jonas Valanciunas to fill a much-needed backup point guard and center position, and THJ was just incredible. However, after escaping that financial crisis, the Denver Nuggets, all they had to do was not sign a historically terrible contract. And then they went to Christian Braun and they got him to sign a historically terrible contract, paying him $25 million a year. Now, I'm not going to say that he did bad the previous season. He did pretty good. 15 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. Good stat line. However, immediately after his contract extension, even before his injury last season, he looked pretty bad. To be fair, his averages do look a lot worse because of the injury. However, he still wasn't great before the injury, even though it was a small sample size. And then Jamal Murray also had a contract extension that kicked in the 25-26 season, a $207 million contract extension. And signing Christian Braun to that much was a mistake, considering that the Nuggets have one of the most expensive cores in the league. Right now, Jokic is getting paid $59 million. Jamal Murray is getting paid $50 million. And Aaron Gordon's being paid a little over $30 million. And then you decide to sign Christian Braun to a $20 million for this year. And keep in mind, he's only going to be making more money as time goes on. So by the last year of his contract, he'll be making close to $30 million. Good for Christian Braun. You got your bag. Clap it up. The issue is now the Nuggets have no cap space whatsoever. None. None at all. They took a look back. They said, this is some nice flexibility. Let's get rid of that right now. This is very similar to the 2023 offseason. Right after they won the championship, we're in the second apron. We got to get rid of some people because some big contract is hitting. The difference is that we came off a title in 2023. This season, Denver lost in the first round to a very, very nerfed Timberwolves. So nerfed, in fact, that I feel comfortable calling it the G League Wolves. The Nuggets lost to the G League Wolves. And right now, the roster construction, with how much money we're paying, it's not great. Okay? Jokic will always be an incredible offensive player. And he's terrible at defense, especially last season. And to be fair, I think the Nuggets have done a decent job trying to improve defensively. They drafted defensive players. They signed Alpha Diallo, who was the EuroLeague Defensive Player of the Year. Defense was terrible last season. So I'm glad they're fixed up. However, with Tim Hardaway Jr. walking and Peyton Watson in question, I just don't know how much offense is going to be able to come from that bench. Tyus Jones' point guard minutes are bleak. They are bleak. And you tell me he has to follow up off Jamal Murray? And keep in mind, there's a reason that Tyus was struggling for minutes. And then we signed Marvin Bagley. Marvin Bagley's not bad. Okay? He's not bad. I'm not going to call him bad. He's a pretty good power forward. The issue is that we signed him to be a center, a backup center, a Marvin Bagley, who is not great on defense. Ladies and gentlemen, that is correct. We are going to have 48 minutes of basketball where the Denver Nuggets have zero rim protection. Hopefully, our power forward that we drafted, Trevon, will be able to fix that. Yeah, there aren't enough creators coming off the bench, in my opinion. And that means every offensive possession has to rely on Jokic. And as credible as he is, the Denver Nuggets have to do something other than pass the ball to Jokic. It's the only offensive playbook that you got right now. And I understand that the rookies looked incredible in that summer league. But the summer league ain't the NBA. It gets harder out here, especially in the West. We got OKC to deal with. We got the defense of the Spurs to deal with. We got the best defenses in our conference. We saw Jamal Murray got locked up by Jaden McDaniels, and see what pass the ball to Jokic and hope and pray does to that team. They did not win that playoff series. They need to be able to do something else. I can't expect Jokic to carry the entire offensive burden for the entire season, especially since from here on out, he's probably only going to regress. He's getting older. He's in his 30s. We have to figure out something to do other than pass Jokic the ball and hope and pray. So what do the Nuggets do? If it were up to me, I would trade Cam Johnson. He's on an expiring contract. He is a valuable player, but he's on an expiring contract. He'd be the easiest person to move. We could probably move him without giving up any of our draft picks. However, the Nuggets have made it clear that they do not want to move him. They want to keep him. Trading Jamal Murray is extremely difficult. His value probably isn't particularly high, especially after that playoff series where he looked terrible. And if you're going to want to move him, you need another starting caliber point guard immediately. Starting Tyus Jones, dear God. Moving Christian Braun is practically impossible after that extension unless his value increases by the trade deadline. And even if his value goes up, I doubt you'd be able to move him without giving up draft picks, which we already lack. And I know a lot of people want to trade Aaron Gordon. No Sirskis. I would not do that. I know his body's breaking down, but he's one of the better defensive forwards in the NBA, and his chemistry with Jokic is too valuable. Instead, I'd move off of Zeke Naji and bet on Trevon, our new rookie, being the backup power forward. Zeke is making $7.5 million a year. You could probably move him for a couple second round picks to a team that needs a forward. And if you do that, you can probably stay under the second apron and sign Peyton Watson. If you can move De'Aaron Holmes as well, even better. He does literally nothing out there. De'Aaron Holmes is getting paid $3 million to do nothing and play garbage time minutes. I'd rather give that $3 million to Peyton Watson so he'd be on the team. A sign and trade involving Peyton Watson's another possibility. However, I'd rather keep him He was a good knockdown three-point shooter last year. He looked incredible during the small stretch Jokic wasn't there, and I'd rather keep one of the defenders on the team who can also be a good offensive piece. Is this a perfect solution? No, there probably isn't one right now. Okay, there probably is not one. The Nuggets put themselves in a real bind here. I think Cam Johnson should be traded. However, the Denver Nuggets clearly aren't going to do that. So I think the move is to trade these power forwards to some team that might want them. The Lakers are looking for some athleticism. You could find some in these boys. I believe it. Is this a perfect solution? No. That's what makes the situation frustrating. The Nuggets aren't one move away from fixing everything. They're trying to squeeze every dollar they can out of their roster. And it's buns right now. If the front office doesn't manage the next couple of years carefully, the Nuggets would waste prime Nikola Jokic. I wouldn't even call him prime Nikola Jokic, but like the last years of him being this god of offense. But what do you think? Are the Nuggets actually in trouble? Am I overreacting? What move would you make if you were the general manager? Let me know. Um, let me know down in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.